Headline: The 2026 Oil Paradox: How Geopolitical Turmoil is Accelerating the Green Transition. While global markets are reeling from record-high crude prices driven by Middle Eastern volatility, a strategic paradox is unfolding. High oil prices have become the most potent catalyst for the clean energy transition. This is no longer theoretical speculation. It is the geopolitical reality of 2026. As dependence on fossil fuels morphs into a systemic national security risk, global powers are aggressively decoupling from traditional energy hubs. Today, we examine how peak oil prices are inadvertently fast-tracking EV adoption and renewable investment, particularly across China and Europe. By applying a realist geopolitical lens to current market data, we will explore how this crisis is fundamentally reshaping the global energy architecture. Let's dive into how this paradox is defining the future of global power. Section 2. The geopolitical chessboard: Energy as a weapon and a catalyst. We find ourselves in a scenario reminiscent of the 1973 oil embargo, yet with a fundamentally different variable. Currently, Brent crude is hovering at historic highs, driven by deep-seated Middle Eastern fissures and the looming threat of a blockade at the Strait of Hormuz, the world's energy jugular. For import-dependent economies like Europe, this is not merely an inflationary pressure, it is an existential strategic vulnerability. By 2026, the EU's energy import bill is projected to eclipse the €300 billion mark, a staggering sum capable of paralyzing macroeconomic growth. Yet, within this crisis lies a strategic silver lining. If the 2022 Ukraine shock served as a wake-up call for European renewables, the current volatility is transforming the Fit for 55 framework from a moral preference into a national security imperative. Meanwhile, China has pivotally seized the high ground with its new three exports: EVs, lithium-ion batteries, and solar technology. Beijing is not just exporting hardware, they are exporting an off-ramp from fossil fuel hegemony. The clean energy race is no longer just about the climate. It is a race for strategic autonomy in a reshaped global order. Section 3. Strategic Forecasting. 3 scenarios for the 2026 energy landscape. To understand the trajectory of this transition, we must evaluate 3 potential geopolitical and economic scenarios. Scenario 1. The market-driven surge. Probability 6, 5, 70%. In this high-conviction scenario, record-high crude prices act as a regressive tax on internal combustion engine ICE ownership. As the total cost of ownership TCO flips decisively in favor of electric vehicles, we anticipate a consumer exodus from fossil fuels. Leveraging their supply chain dominance, Chinese EV giants will likely capture unprecedented global market share, effectively turning high oil prices into a strategic tool for market consolidation. Scenario 2. Strategic decoupling and national security. Probability 5, 60%. At the state level, the volatility of 2026 catalyzes a shift from green policy to energy sovereignty. Governments in Brussels and Washington will treat renewable infrastructure, wind, solar, and grid storage as critical defense assets. The objective is clear: to eliminate the geopolitical leverage currently held by petrostates. This scenario envisions a massive capital influx into energy independence, further widening the gap between technologically advanced economies and those still tethered to the old oil order. Scenario 3. The stagflationary backlash. Probability 20%. The primary risk remains a systemic economic slowdown. If protracted high energy costs trigger global stagflation, fiscal space for EV subsidies and green infrastructure may contract. While this friction could delay the transition, the fundamental collapse in battery costs and the irreversible nature of existing climate mandates suggest that any slowdown would be a tactical delay rather than a strategic reversal. Section 4. The game theory of energy. Deciphering strategic motives. To understand why the 2026 oil crisis is triggering an irreversible shift, we must look at the board through the lens of strategic incentives. 1. China's dominant strategy, consolidating green hegemony. For Beijing, maintaining dominance over the new three supply chains, EVs, batteries, and solar, is a dominant strategy. Record high oil prices act as a trade catalyst, making Chinese green exports economically irresistible. By deepening domestic electrification, China is not only mitigating its Malacca dilemma, dependence on vulnerable sea lanes, but is also architecting a new global economic order centered on its technological standards. 2. The European gambit. De-risking through decarbonization. Europe is attempting to exit what has historically been a negative-sum game, a continuous drain of capital to petrostates. In the 2026 context, EV adoption is a dual-purpose instrument, a shield for national security and a life support system for its legacy automotive labor force. The goal is a transition to a positive-sum energy architecture where domestic generation replaces foreign reliance. 3. The global Nash equilibrium. We have reached a geopolitical Nash equilibrium. Given the massive sunk costs in charging infrastructure and gigafactories, no major player has an incentive to defect back to fossil fuels, even if crude prices eventually stabilize. The convergence of national security, technological advantage, and fiscal reality has rendered the green transition a one-way street on the global power map. The 2026 oil crisis is more than a geopolitical chess match. It is a fundamental restructuring of daily life. At the macro level, we are seeing a historic capital flight toward renewables. As global investment scales into the trillions, China is cementing its status as the green hegemon, while Europe aggressively de-risks its national budget from the volatility of foreign crude. The microeconomic impact. Sticker shock versus long-term yield. Record high pump prices are driving a pivot in consumer behavior. EVs have transitioned from an environmental lifestyle choice to an essential economic hedge. The labor paradigm shift. A new industrial workforce is emerging. The rise of green-collar jobs in battery manufacturing and smart grid infrastructure is providing a vital buffer against the decline of legacy fossil fuel sectors, strategic vulnerabilities. Yet, the transition carries significant geopolitical friction. The West remains wary of its systemic dependence on Chinese supply chains for critical minerals. Furthermore, we face a looming energy divide, where developing nations in the global South struggle with the high upfront capital requirements of the green transition. The horizon. These shifts will manifest decisively over the next 6 to 24 months, creating an unstoppable momentum toward the 2030 energy architecture. Section 6. Conclusion. The architecture of a new energy order. As we survey the geopolitical landscape of 2026, the paradox is clear. The nightmare of record high oil prices has become the ultimate catalyst for a carbon-free future. While Beijing cements its status as a green hegemon, Europe is accelerating its strategic decoupling from the volatility of petrostate dependence. The key takeaway. This is not merely a market correction, it is a historical pivot. Decarbonization has transitioned from a moral aspiration to a systemic national security imperative. To capitalize on this historic window, global powers must ensure policy consistency and foster international cooperation, even amidst rising competition. In short, high oil prices have served as a stark reminder that energy, sovereignty, and a clean future are no longer luxuries, they are existential necessities. What is your take on this shift? How will sustained high energy costs redefine the EV landscape in emerging markets like Vietnam? Join the conversation in the comments below.